The moment a woman ignores you is not the moment you lose power. It's the moment your power is tested. When a woman goes quiet, the mind immediately wants to personalize it. The silence feels heavy, almost accusatory, as if it's saying something about your worth, your attractiveness, or your importance. But silence is not a verdict on who you are. It is data. It is a signal. And emotionally intelligent people learn to read signals without letting their ego rewrite the story. Silence does not automatically mean rejection, disrespect, or manipulation. It simply means something has shifted. Her attention, her emotions, her priorities, or her capacity to engage in that moment. The problem is not the silence itself, the problem is the meaning you attach to it. Most men interpret being ignored as an insult because their identity is tied to being chosen, responded to, or validated. When the reply doesn't come, insecurity fills the gap. The mind starts creating explanations that are rooted in fear rather than reality. I said something wrong. I'm not good enough. She's deliberately trying to hurt me. But these thoughts are assumptions, not facts. Silence is neutral until you turn it into a personal attack. The moment you feel insulted by silence, you give it emotional power over you, and that power often leads to reactive behavior that works against you. Silence can mean many things. It can mean she's overwhelmed. It can mean she's unsure. It can mean she's distracted by life, work, emotions, or past experiences. It can also mean she's losing interest. But even in that case, the silence is still information, not humiliation. It's telling you where you stand without words. And information, no matter how uncomfortable, is valuable. It saves you from chasing something that isn't aligned, and it reveals whether emotional availability is mutual or one-sided. The emotionally mature response is observation, not reaction. When you treat silence as information, you stop trying to force clarity through confrontation or over-communication. You allow space for reality to show itself. You watch patterns instead of obsessing over moments. One unanswered message does not define anything, but repeated silence forms a pattern, and patterns tell the truth more accurately than emotions ever will. This approach keeps your dignity intact and your judgment clear. Seeing silence as information also protects your self-respect. When you don't take it personally, you don't beg for explanations or chase reassurance. You understand that attention is not something to negotiate for. If someone wants to engage, they will. If they don't, no amount of emotional pressure will change that. By accepting silence calmly, you communicate inner stability, which is far more powerful than any verbal defense of your worth. Most importantly, silence exposes your relationship with yourself. If silence unsettles you deeply, it's an invitation to examine why external responses control your emotional state. The goal is not to become indifferent, but to become grounded. When you stop treating silence as an insult, you stop reacting from wounded pride and start responding from self-awareness. When a woman ignores you, the impulse to chase is rarely about her. It is about the discomfort you feel within yourself. Chasing attention is an emotional reflex, not a strategic choice. It comes from the fear of losing connection, relevance, or control. The mind convinces itself that if you explain more, say the right thing, or show extra effort, the silence will disappear. But attraction does not grow from emotional urgency. It weakens under it. The moment you start chasing attention, you are no longer expressing interest. You are seeking reassurance. Attention-seeking behavior often disguises itself as sincerity. Long messages, repeated check-ins, emotional explanations, and just making sure you're okay texts are framed as care. But underneath them sits anxiety. The unspoken message is, please don't forget me. And people don't respond to pressure the way they respond to presence. When someone feels chased, they feel burdened. When someone feels chosen freely, they feel valued. The difference is subtle, but the impact is dramatic. Chasing attention also disrupts power balance. Relationships, romantic or otherwise, require mutual investment. When one person is overinvesting emotionally while the other withdraws, the dynamic becomes uneven. The more you chase, the more you reinforce the idea that your time, energy, and emotional availability are abundant and easily accessible, while hers becomes scarce and valuable. Scarcity increases value only when it comes from self-respect, not emotional withdrawal driven by fear. When you chase, you unintentionally place the other person above you. There is also a loss of self-trust that happens when you chase attention. You stop listening to the signals being given and start arguing with reality. Silence is a form of communication, and when you refuse to accept it, you communicate that you don't trust yourself to handle the truth. Instead of allowing things to unfold naturally, you try to force certainty. This often leads to overthinking, emotional exhaustion, and regret over things said in a moment of vulnerability that was never meant to be exposed. Emotionally grounded individuals do not chase responses because their sense of worth is not dependent on immediate feedback. They understand that interest cannot be negotiated. It either exists or it doesn't. When attention is freely given, it feels light. When it has to be pursued, it feels heavy, and heaviness drains attraction. Stepping back is not a tactic. It is alignment with reality. It signals that you value mutual interest, not one-sided effort. By not chasing attention, you create space for clarity. If someone wants to engage, the space allows them to step forward. If they don't, the space protects your dignity. This restraint is often misunderstood as indifference, but it is actually self-respect in action. You are not withholding to manipulate. You are withdrawing your energy from a situation that is not reciprocated. That decision strengthens your emotional discipline and reinforces the standard you set for how you allow people to treat you. In moments of silence, most people believe the right words can restore connection. They search for the perfect message, the perfect explanation, the perfect emotional tone that will reopen the door. But attraction has never been about perfect wording. It has always been about emotional presence. When someone ignores you, what they are responding to is not what you say next, but how you manage yourself in uncertainty. Emotional control speaks louder than reassurance, logic, or vulnerability offered too soon. Losing emotional control does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it appears as overcommunication, nervous humor, unnecessary apologies, or subtle pressure disguised as concern. These behaviors signal inner imbalance. They reveal that silence unsettles you, that your emotional state depends on external responses. And while vulnerability is healthy in the right context, unregulated emotion during uncertainty creates emotional weight. Attraction thrives in emotional safety, and emotional safety is created by calmness, not urgency. Emotional control does not mean suppression. It means awareness without impulsive action. You can feel confusion, disappointment, or even hurt, and still choose not to act from those emotions. This restraint demonstrates inner strength. It shows that you trust yourself enough to sit with discomfort without needing immediate relief. People are drawn to those who can remain stable when things are unclear, because stability suggests reliability, confidence, and depth. Words often try to compensate for emotional imbalance. When someone feels anxious, they talk more. They explain themselves more. They attempt to control the outcome through language. But attraction responds to emotional tone, not explanation. Silence met with calm creates curiosity. Silence met with emotional restraint communicates that you are centered, not reactive. This is why emotionally grounded individuals often say less, yet leave a stronger impression. Emotional control also shifts how you perceive the situation. Instead of obsessing over being ignored, you begin to evaluate compatibility. You ask yourself whether this dynamic feels aligned, respectful, and balanced. This internal shift moves you from seeking approval to assessing standards. And the moment you stop trying to be chosen, you start choosing consciously. That shift alone changes how you show up in every interaction. When you respond from emotional control, you protect your dignity. You don't send messages you later regret. You don't reveal insecurity prematurely. You don't hand over emotional leverage. You allow time to reveal truth. Whether the connection continues or fades, you remain intact. Emotional control is attractive because it reflects self-leadership. It shows that you are not governed by impulse, but by self-awareness and inner steadiness. Being ignored is often misunderstood as a judgment of worth, but in many cases it is a quiet test of emotional maturity. Not a deliberate or calculated test, but an instinctive one. People naturally observe how others behave when things are uncertain. Silence creates pressure, and pressure reveals character. When communication pauses, what is being measured is not how impressive you are, but how stable you remain when reassurance is removed. Emotional maturity is shown in restraint, not reaction. Many individuals unconsciously pull back to see what happens next. They want to know whether the other person becomes anxious, controlling, resentful, or calm. This is not always intentional, nor is it always fair, but it is deeply human. The absence of response creates a mirror. Some people fill that mirror with insecurity, others with composure. The reaction that follows the silence communicates far more than any initial interaction ever could. When someone reacts emotionally to being ignored by sending multiple messages, demanding explanations, or expressing frustration, they reveal an internal fragility. Not because emotions are wrong, but because those emotions are unmanaged. It signals that uncertainty is threatening, that validation is necessary for emotional balance. This is not attractive, not because vulnerability is weak, but because emotional instability feels unsafe. People gravitate toward those who can remain emotionally consistent even when situations are unclear. Emotional maturity, on the other hand, is shown by patience and perspective. It is the ability to pause and recognize that silence does not require immediate correction. Mature individuals understand that not everything needs to be resolved instantly. They allow space without attaching fear to it. They do not jump to conclusions or assign malicious intent where there may be none. This calm response often shifts the dynamic because it removes pressure and restores emotional equilibrium. Ignoring can also be a way for someone to process their own feelings. Not everyone communicates clearly when they feel overwhelmed, confused, or conflicted. Some withdraw to regain clarity. How you respond to that withdrawal determines whether you are seen as emotionally safe or emotionally demanding. A composed response communicates understanding without surrendering self-respect. It says, I am secure enough to give space without disappearing or chasing. This moment often separates emotional strength from emotional dependency. When you don't collapse under silence, you demonstrate that your identity is not built on constant affirmation. You show that you have a life, purpose, and inner stability that exists independently of someone else's attention. This is not about playing games or appearing indifferent. It is about being genuinely grounded in who you are, regardless of external behavior. What many fail to realize is that reactions under pressure leave lasting impressions. Even if communication resumes later, how you handled the silence will be remembered. Emotional maturity builds quiet respect. It creates a sense that you are predictable in a healthy way, steady in moments where others unravel. Silence, in that sense, becomes a filter. It exposes emotional patterns that words can hide and reveals whether someone responds from self-awareness or emotional reflex. True confidence is not loud, performative, or dependent on outcomes. It is revealed in moments of pressure, especially when expectations are disrupted. When a woman ignores you, pressure builds internally, doubt creeps in, ego feels threatened, and the urge to react becomes strong. This is where confidence is either exposed or reinforced. Remaining unchanged under pressure does not mean you feel nothing. It means your behavior does not collapse just because circumstances are uncomfortable. Most people confuse confidence with control. They believe confidence means being able to fix the situation, regain attention, or steer the outcome. In reality, confidence is the absence of desperation for control. It is the ability to allow situations to unfold without losing self-respect or emotional stability. When you remain consistent in your behavior despite silence, you communicate that your identity is not dependent on immediate validation. That steadiness is rare, and rarity naturally attracts attention. Pressure reveals attachment to outcomes. When your mood, tone, or self-image shifts drastically because someone hasn't responded, it shows that your sense of value is externally anchored. Confidence, on the other hand, is internally rooted. It allows you to continue living your life, maintaining your routines, and engaging with purpose rather than pausing your world for someone else's response. This grounded behavior sends a subtle but powerful message. Your life is full, and your energy is not waiting to be claimed. Remaining unchanged also prevents emotional overcorrection. Under pressure, many people swing between extremes, overly nice one moment, cold or resentful the next. This inconsistency creates confusion and emotional instability. Confidence is predictable in the healthiest way. It doesn't punish silence, and it doesn't reward it with extra effort. It simply maintains its baseline. That emotional neutrality communicates strength far more effectively than dramatic reactions ever could. There is also self-respect in not abandoning your standards under pressure. When someone ignores you, pressure may tempt you to lower your boundaries, tolerate uncertainty longer than feels right, or justify behavior that doesn't align with your values. Confidence resists that temptation. It allows you to acknowledge what feels misaligned without rushing to fix it. You don't beg for attention, and you don't close yourself off in bitterness. You stay aligned with who you were before the pressure appeared. People often feel drawn back to those who remain unchanged because consistency feels safe. Emotional stability suggests maturity, depth, and self-trust. When you don't emotionally fluctuate based on someone else's behavior, you demonstrate that you are self-led. That leadership creates a quiet authority. It tells others that engagement with you is a choice, not an obligation, and that choice is respected either way. Remaining unchanged under pressure also protects you from regret. You don't look back and wish you had acted differently, said less, or held your composure. You know that you honored yourself regardless of the outcome. That internal approval matters more than external validation. Confidence, at its core, is knowing that no matter how others behave, you remain rooted in your own sense of worth and direction. The desire for validation is deeply human. When someone pulls away or goes silent, the instinct to seek reassurance becomes strong. A reply, a sign of interest, or even an explanation can feel like emotional relief. But temporary validation is fleeting. It soothes anxiety in the moment while quietly eroding self-respect underneath. When you prioritize being acknowledged over being aligned with your values, you trade long-term dignity for short-term comfort. Self-respect is built on how you treat yourself when no one is rewarding you for it. It shows up in the choices you make when attention is withheld. Do you compromise your standards to feel chosen, or do you hold them even when it costs you connection? When you chase validation, you signal to yourself that your worth is negotiable. Over time, this creates internal dissonance. You may get the response you wanted, but you lose something more important: trust in your own boundaries. Temporary validation often demands emotional self-betrayal. You ignore discomfort, excuse inconsistency, or tolerate disrespect just to keep the connection alive. Silence becomes something you endure rather than something you assess. In that process, your emotional needs shrink while the other person's control over the dynamic grows. Validation gained this way does not strengthen bonds, it creates imbalance. And imbalance eventually breeds resentment, even if it starts with relief. Self-respect, by contrast, requires patience and restraint. It asks you to sit with uncertainty rather than rush to erase it. It reminds you that being chosen at the cost of your dignity is not being chosen at all. When you respect yourself, you don't demand attention and you don't beg for clarity. You allow behavior to speak for itself. If someone is inconsistent, unavailable, or indifferent, you acknowledge that reality without trying to rewrite it. Choosing self-respect over validation also reshapes your internal narrative. You stop asking, "How do I get their attention back?" and start asking, "Does this dynamic meet my standards?" That shift moves you from approval seeking to self-alignment. You become less concerned with being liked and more concerned with being respected by others and by yourself. This internal shift changes how you show up in all relationships, not just romantic ones. There is quiet strength in walking away emotionally, even if you stay physically present. You don't announce it. You don't dramatize it. You simply stop investing where energy is not reciprocated. That decision restores balance within you. It reinforces the belief that your time, presence, and emotional availability are valuable and should be shared where they are appreciated. Over time, prioritizing self-respect builds emotional resilience. You become less reactive to silence and less dependent on external affirmation. Validation, when it comes, feels like a bonus rather than a necessity. And even when it doesn't come, you remain intact, grounded in the knowledge that you did not abandon yourself for the comfort of being momentarily seen